My name is Carmen Rodriguez. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a Chilean-Canadian writer living here in Vancouver since 1974. That's a long time. And I came here because of the military coup in my native country. And I have written a few books, including poetry and short stories and novels. And I'm here this evening to facilitate this conversation, this discussion, with Natalia García Freire, who's joining us from Ecuador. Unfortunately, she could not be here today in person, which was the whole idea. She had been invited by the Vancouver International Writers Festival, and unfortunately, she was not able to get a visa. Canada did not give her the visa on time or ever. Nothing, right? Terrible. So anyway, at least she's been able, thanks to this technology that we have now, she's been able to join us in this way, which is not the same, pero peor es nada, ¿verdad? Peor es nada. Okay. So Natalia García Freire, whose short stories you've read for this session. She was born in Cuenca, Ecuador, in 1991, which means that she's very young, very young. She teaches creative writing at Asua University and has also worked as a primary school teacher. García Freire's journalistic work has appeared in outlets such as BBC Mundo and Univision, and her short story, Noche de Fiesta, was published in the Spanish literary journal La Gran Belleza. She's the author of this novel, This World Does Not Belong to Us, which we talked about at the Writers' Festival on Wednesday evening, together with the work of another Latina, Claudia Castro Luna, who's a poet. And this book is Natalia's debut novel, first novel, and it was nominated for the Tigre Juan Literary Award and selected by the New York Times as one of the best Spanish language books of 2019. And it has been translated into Italian, French, Turkish, and English. So welcome, Natalia. And thank you very much for being here with us this evening to talk about your short stories. So, first of all, before we begin our discussion, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, more than what that very short professional bio says? Like, for example, what led you to become a writer? What is it like to write in Ecuador today? Are you part of a community of writers there? Could you tell us about that?
Well, of course. First, thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, I cannot be there, but I'm very happy I can assist virtually, at least. And thank you, Carmen, for being such a good reader for my work and a very nice host. Well, being a writer in Ecuador, it's been very hard being a women writer here, but I have to thank and to recognize a lot of women writers that have published a lot of works before me. Mónica Ojeda, María Fernanda Ampuero, Solange Rodriguez. They have a lot of recognition now. But one thing that's common to all of us is that we've all been published in Spain first than in Ecuador. So in Ecuador, that's still the problem. You have to have the recognition outside so you can have recognition here. And I think I would have not become a writer if I had not go to Spain, not because of the publishing houses or the recognition or anything, but because of the public libraries. Here in Ecuador, in Cuenca, in my city, we have no public libraries. So when I was a child, when I was growing up, I read a lot, but my reading was limited because I could not afford to discover new authors, because it's very hard here to have books because they are expensive, and there are not a lot of independent publishing houses here. So it's very, very hard to read new things outside of the big publishing houses. So I think what makes me a writer, or what lets me to write in the first time, was reading authors in public libraries, such as Shirley Jackson. She's a women writer that was not published too much, but she's been like rediscovered now, because she was not so recognized at the time she was alive. So I guess there are a lot of things that contribute to people like me from Latin America, women from really small countries like Ecuador, that contribute to believe that we can write, that we can maybe sometime be read by someone else. And for me, it was public libraries, independent publishing houses, and authors that make me realize that I wanted to write those kind of stories, like Shirley Jackson stories. Those stories are very domestic stories, very intimate. Those are horror stories, but I could relate to them. I could relate to that kind of stories the way I could not relate with a lot of authors I've read before. Now I feel that I belong to a community of writers, but most of them are in other countries. They live in other countries. But I think I found a community in Ecuadorian writers outside of this country, because most of all, they are very generous. Like Mónica Ojeda, Maria Fernanda Ampuero, they are really nice with the new authors, with novel authors that are writing. So they've been so nice with me, with my books. They've been really generous, like recommending the book. So I think that's because we don't have a very big community of writers, that we are trying to help each other all the time, to help the books go in other places or being translated. So I think that's a really nice thing that is happening in Ecuador, because we didn't have in the boom, the boom of Latin America, of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Mario Vargas Llosa. We didn't have a very important writer there, Ecuador. We were always like the ones that were not read, were not discovered. We were kind of hiding it between Peru and Colombia. But right now, I think we are all just pushing each other to be better. that's what I feel now in my community of writers, and I feel very lucky of that, because I've felt all the time that I have a lot of friends around me with my first novel, and yeah, that we are just kind of trying to make Ecuadorian literature a thing, a thing that people can see or can recognize at least.
Yeah, and you're achieving that, because your novel has been translated into several languages now, right? It's being discussed, like by people like us, or your short stories with people outside of Ecuador, right? At the festival here, which is an international festival, you got a lot of recognition. So congratulations about that, and good to hear that you don't feel alone, right? That you are part of a community of writers that helps each other. Well, we're here mainly to talk about your two short stories that we read. The one about the bear, the bear mask, and the chess piece, which in Spanish is called alfil, right? What I saw in your stories, we're just getting more guests in, so we just give them the more the better. So everybody has read the stories, right? Yeah? Yes. And we're all ready to talk about them, right? Yes. So I don't know if anybody here has read Natalia's novel, but I found that just like in her novel, in these two stories, Natalia is using metaphor, right? Metaphor and kind of lyrical language in a way to write about very difficult issues, right? Like trauma, like child abuse, depression, alcoholism, decay, right? Death. These are very dark issues. And these two stories deal with those issues, but in a way that is very creative, very metaphorical, right? It's not like she's telling these stories head on, in a way that will use very direct language. But at the same time, she's telling these stories about those issues in a way that is very impactful, right? So how did you guys feel about the use of metaphor, the way that Natalia chooses to tell these stories?
Are we talking about the alfil or?
Either one, because I find that the style of writing, right, and the approach to writing is similar.
I really like both stories because even though she's using this metaphor, she's kind of like narrating the story, so it's very fast and engaging. Like, it's not like she's making a metaphor, like writing and like describing. There's not a lot of description, but more action, and I find that captivating. Like, it really gave me that image of what she was trying to do.
So there was a good pace to the stories, right? There was the use of metaphor, but it was at the same time narrative, right? It didn't stay in describing these things, but there was a narration there, and there was a good pace. Any other comments? Hola, Cata. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It made you they're short. Usually short stories aren't that short, so it was just very powerful and just made you, for me, just thinking like what, trying to understand it and imagine, these images and what they're really meaning, and it just makes you really want to think about it, and read it again. I read it 2 or 3 times. I found it really, really powerful.
Did you get new things after the first reading? Like, for example, could you give us an example of?
Well, the first one I read sort of on the bus yesterday because I take a class at UBC and I was reading it fast on my phone and I was like, oh, and I'm in healthcare, I'm thinking, oh, she's actually like a quadriplegic and actually, and then when I read it today, I'm like, no, obviously, that's ridiculous.
Well, she was in an accident.
And so then I had a, totally different understanding, but I'll probably read it again and get deeper into the metaphor and what you're saying.
Yeah, because there are these layers, right? That's what metaphor allows a writer to create, right? A whole bunch of layers of meaning behind what is on the surface.
Yeah. So, like you said, these topics were, I don't know if dark, but definitely heavy. Right? Yeah. Heavy topics, especially like in the chess, the one with, about aging. And so I like that putting it in a metaphorical sense makes it really humorous, right? The first time you read it, I read it, I thought, what the heck's going on here? And I thought, okay, maybe it is a serious thing about, falling apart. But then you read it again, and it just got funnier every time you read it because, it's a way to deal with heavy issues, with serious issues by making them comic.
So you saw humor in it, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Did other people see humor?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So let's stick with that story then, with the chess piece. What else struck people about that one story? Yeah. Of course, ask Natalia.
So Natalia, I just wonder if you could tell us if when you're writing and you're using metaphor, if you begin with one idea and it morphs into something else, into something else, into something else until you get to the point where it's right for you and it's saying what you want to say without saying it. If you know what I mean.
Well, for me, it's different when I'm writing a novel than when I'm writing a short story. When I'm writing a short story, I usually have the emotion very clear. For example, in chess piece, the emotion was all mine. I was feeling like that girl in the short story that has the arms and the legs unattached, because I was going through a diagnosis of a mental disorder, bipolar disorder, and I was feeling kind of depressed, but also kind of wanting to explode. And I was in a relationship, and for me the emotion was the of being kind of a person that is not complete. So I had that emotion very, very clear in my head. And when I write a short story, I try to play a lot of games, kind of what is the image of being incomplete? Or if you are incomplete, then you look like games, like really child games for me, very, very like when you are in the school and you have to complete sentences. For me, it's like that when I'm writing a short story. So for that story, I started playing and I started putting down notes like feeling incomplete is like being Papa. Feeling like you don't want to get out of bed is like being, or you look like. So then when I had the image of this lady with the arms and the legs that were kind of running out of her, then I knew I was going to write the short story until the end, but I didn't knew what I was going to write. But once I got the image, I know I can just sit down and clack, 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 clack. That's, for me, it's just like that. You have to have that image in a short story, of an emotion. It's like turning the emotion into something you can touch. That's how I write short stories.
Any other questions or comments for Natalia?
I mean, just the last thing she said, turning emotion into something you can touch. That's so inspiring. I mean, yeah. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Well, two evenings ago at the Writers' Festival event, Natalia told us that in writing a novel, she starts with a sound. It's a sound that inspires her. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Natalia? Because nobody from that is here, Angela maybe was the only one, and Alan, that were there that evening. Could you tell this group about that?
Of course. Well, when writing a novel, for me, it's finding a unique sound. For example, I told that this world does not belong to us. I could write it because I realized the sound, the specific sound of it was bees buzzing. But I think it's different from a short story, because short stories are closer to poetry. You know, it's an image. It's a very specific image. But in a novel, you have a voice. You have a voice that can be talking for a long time. It does not have to be a specific image. It can be just someone talking, but for me, it's a sound. In my second novel, the sound of that second novel, or the sound I could hear when I was trying to write it, was the sound of a lot of birds, like falling down and invading a place, like a bunch of birds, a very big bunch of birds invading a place. So for me, writing novels, it's more a thing of sounds, and writing short stories is more a thing of images, because it's closer to poetry. I think I haven't write poetry. I mean, I wrote it very secretly, because I kind of I still don't understand how to. But I think short story is the closest I've been to write poetry, because of that, because of the emotion needing to be something very concrete, very material.
Yeah. Yeah, and you succeed in that. And it's also so much more economical, right, in terms of the use of language. You only have a few pages, right? And a limited number of words. So every word has to be the right word, right? You cannot waste words, right? You have to be accurate and economical in your use of. So you told us about what prompted you to write chess piece. Were there, and for the novel, you also tell us in the preface that you wanted to tell the story of your grandmother's house, and that's what prompted you to begin this novel. Now you have just told us what was happening, what prompted El Alfil, right? Was there something also concrete in your life that prompted you to write The Bear Mask?
Yeah, well, chess piece and The Bear Mask are part of a collection of short stories that I'm still writing, but all of the short stories there are based on something real of my life. But I try to investigate that event through fantastic literature, right? So the Bear Mask has a lot to do with my childhood because my father was an alcoholic. So for me, it was really hard for me to talk about it, or to even to talk with my father is still hard for me. So I was trying to investigate or to understand through fantasy and through fantastic events what I felt as a child. What was my feeling of that, right? So most of the times when you have an alcoholic father, mother, or someone in the family, it's like they are turning into child because you have to take care of them. So for me, it was kind of very clear when I was starting to write that short story that the main character, the father, was not growing old. He was turning into a baby. And the most difficult thing for the three little girls was trying to take care of that man that was supposed to take care of them. So that's the real event behind that short story. And I guess it helps me a lot to understand what I was feeling when I was little, what I was always trying to be the adult or an adult in the family. So I think that was the good part of it, but also for me it's a very hard story. I recently received the Southwest Review edition. That's where the short story is. And that's and for me it's still hard to see it or to read it, because for me it's true, everything there it's true, even if it's not. But I think that's how fiction works, right? You turn true into a lie that's most of the times is even worse for you. So yeah.
A few days ago I was in another event where the author talked about writing as therapeutic, right? It was good therapy, right? To write. In this case, she had written all these poems. But what she said that struck me, and I think I would apply it to your work as well, was writing these poems, she said, helped me to get through painful events in my life. But I didn't want to stop there. I wanted to make art. There's a difference, right, between writing just for therapy, just because it will help you, and writing for that reason, plus, and most importantly, to create something that you can call art, right? Something that you can actually put out in the world because of its artistic quality, not only because of the content, right? So that's the difficulty, right? How do you go from a journal into a novel, or a few notes, about what happened to you when you were a child, and a short story that is actually a great short story, not just a therapeutical kind of piece, right? How do you people feel about that? Yeah, Kata?
I have so much admiration, and I just want to say thank you. Like, it's so inspirational and so courageous and so vulnerable, everything that you've shared with us. And at the same time, as Carmen was saying, turning that into a piece of art that inspires us to write and to be real and to be human and to feel our emotions. So that was very powerful. I just wanted to mention both the stories. The one for chess, I didn't feel like it was it wasn't humorous to me. Like, it was pretty raw and gruesome and real and painful. Like, I just read it once because I couldn't read it again. I was like, whoa, this hurts. Like, literally having her limbs like technically falling off her body. That was just like a very painful image to just sort of like digest. And it really spoke to me of, I think you, as an author, you were really good at turning this metaphor into, because for me it really felt as an internal struggle. It really felt more than a person actually struggling with perhaps some sort of physical pain, like really just mundane or just physical. It really transpired to me that it was an internal struggle of being broken. And that was powerful to me. I wanted to ask you about the character Dixon, because I wasn't sure. I thought, is Dixon like that voice of hers that allows her to move on? Like, get up, do this one thing that you have to do today, get out of bed. And kind of like that internal struggle of hers to stay in her bed and not move forward. But Dixon was that other character that I think both characters were really, in such an economical way, were very well developed. At least for me, I felt like I could sense who Dixon was, like this guy who was probably around trying to push her to get out of bed. But I wanted to know, from your perspective, who is Dixon?
Yes, Dixon, love it.
Because I was curious.
This is kind of hard because Dixon was my ex-boyfriend. I lived with this guy for 6 years. And when I wrote the short story, I immediately showed it to him. And he told me, thank you, because now I know, this is painful for both of us. Not just for you, but for me too, because in the end, Dixon is the one that is really suffering, and she realizes that, like, that he cannot deal with it, and that short story is one of the short stories I've ever written that it's really, really real. A lot of facts in there are real, like those things like get out of the bed or what is going on with you cannot be like this, but I was kind of trying to deal with it in a way that I could see the other person and myself from a distance, because when you are struggling with depression or with pain or with physical pain or with interior pain, you can only see yourself from the inside. You cannot look at yourself from the distance. So most of the time what I did was I felt like a victim, or I felt a lot of compassion about myself, and I wanted to make that go away. So that's why it seems like a humorous thing when he says, like, oh no, you're having self-pity again, you're feeling self-pity for yourself, but I was trying to look at myself from the distance, and I was trying to feel compassion also for the person that was living with me, and for both of us for struggling with that situation. And he was Dixon. His name was not Dixon. Dixon is because I love this author that is called Stephen Dixon. He's an American author. And he plays a lot with a lot of situations. He turns that situations into humor things, or he plays a lot with language. So I was kind of making a little homenaje. How do you say it?
Homage.
Yeah, to that author. So it's kind of a hybrid in my ex-boyfriend and Stephen Dixon. And thank you for reading this story with that attention.
Anybody else? Any questions?
I kind of like found funny when you said like, "Oh, bring me the leg," or
Yeah.
"Pass me my arm."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, there is
going back
humor
to
there,
that,
yeah.
So I found that humorous.
Yeah.
I want to point out of that story like the need of a hug, because like she's the one realizing that he needs the hug, but it made me think that it was her needing the hug, and in that hug then she's destroyed again. Like it's so symbolic. I found it. And yeah, I had to read this story twice because I was like not understanding fully what's happening. I had the same feeling as her, like she was like in a car accident or something. Then she was not. And also to pick up with your question, I was just like on my head was like Claudia Castro Luna's words about writing, and she doesn't agree very much on writing for healing, but writing for gaining perspective. And I think in a way that's what you mentioned about this story.
Gaining perspective.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point.
Well, the question about the therapy, I mean, I think some of it is just talent. Like, it's probably good therapy for a lot of people to write, but it may not be something that other people would really want to read because they're not talented writers. But someone like you, you know, could write for therapy, but it's also an incredible story that means other people would read and get something else out of it. Because I know often writers say whatever the audience or the reader gets out of it, it's not. Often it's something that I never even imagined. Once it's out there, it's everyone interprets it differently.
But is it talent? Is it work? What is it, right?
And work.
So something that we discussed on Wednesday as well was how, while the content of a piece is obviously fundamental to the writing, what really makes that piece of writing a piece of art, or what it is the form, right? Is the craft of how the story is told, right? Because let's take, for example, the chess piece, right? What you're calling a non-talented writer, or somebody that is writing just for therapy, let's say, right? Will say, oh, I was feeling really depressed, and I felt like my body was all broken up, right? And I was in bed, and I couldn't get out of bed. I felt so sorry for myself, and my poor boyfriend, he had to put up with me, and the end. Fome. Remember that word? Boring, right? Boring.
But it might help the person who's writing it if it's therapeutic.
Exactly. It's therapeutic, right? Because they wrote it, they put it out there, right? And they maybe put things in perspective to a certain extent. But if you take that same story and you do something like what Natalia did, right? That's art. It's the craft, right? It's how she expressed those feelings and that situation in a way that's innovative, that uses language in such a way that sets it apart from other stories. You know, how many stories have been written about depression and about not being able to get out of bed? Thousands, hundreds of thousands, right? But not all are good, and not all are the same, because la gracia está en que the point is that what will make an author unique and a good author is the way in which that author wrote that story, right? And I think that here we're looking at and talking with somebody who has managed to do that in a very, very masterful way.
So you're talking about an author being able to sublimate the physical occurrences of everyday life and convert it into like a new language, right?
Exactly. Yeah, right.
Well, I like, well, she mentioned earlier, she said, feeling like you don't want to get out of bed is like, and then that just sort of leads you into creating an image and inspires you to create then your piece of art, right? So I like to think that the idea of doing exercises like this can turn someone who writes for therapy into being able to create art yourself as well, to some extent, right?
So maybe I should put it on in my notes for my workshops. That will be our new exercise, you guys.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's not related directly to the stories, but I know and I found that a lot of artists in different disciplines, when they move to a new country or when you put them in a new land or in a new context, they are not able to write, they are not able to paint, they are not able to do music because they are so attached to where they belong to the land. So how you feel about that? So you need to be in Ecuador, is that something that it really matters to you, it is important to you, or you can just write from everywhere?
The feeling about translation, right?
It's more about if you have the kind of necessity, or if you feel that you are so attached to Ecuador that if you tomorrow decide to live in Spain or in Canada or somewhere else, it's going to be hard for you to write the same way that you are writing, or even just to write.
Well, I don't know, when I wrote my first novel, I was living in Spain. I was studying creative writing and working as a nanny, as a babysitter. And I found it really, I don't know, it was my first novel, so I was kind of discovering the way I write. But what I really needed was coming back here to finish that story, because I could not finish it in Spain. I could not put the end, the final point. And I needed to see my grandma's house for the last time to finish that story. I guess I can write any place, in any place, but I do need some contact with the mountains. I don't know how to explain it, but when I'm out of town, when I'm out of my city or out of of the mountains, because I live in the Andes, I feel really nervous and anxious, and I feel like I'm not protected by the mountains anymore. So I guess that is something I really need to write, even if I'm not writing about it, because in my novels I've wrote about these mountains. You know, the atmosphere is located here. The location is the Andes mountains, even if it's not mentioned. But in the short stories, there are no mountains, but I need them. I need to see them. I need to have a really small sky, because in the Andes, the sky is shorter. It's not wide open. When I was in Madrid, I felt like I was gonna go crazy because the sky was so big, was wide open, and I could not deal with that because my sky is really little. So I think that's what I mean. That's why what I feel when I write, I have to be protected by these mountains. Maybe that's why I've stayed here in Cuenca in Ecuador. And I wouldn't want to go to other place really. I want to stay here with my cat. I have a really simple life here. And yeah, I have the cat, everything. I can walk anywhere because my city is small. I have a lot of nature around, mountains, woods. I can go to the next block and I have fruits, vegetables, everything I need. It's really so simple, so nice to be able to live here. I can have the water directly from the bathroom, from the kitchen. I think when I was in Madrid, I realized sometimes one is looking for a lot of things, but the most luxury things like water, like food, nature can be around. Maybe Ecuador, it's a very lucky country because of what you can have with not so much money or not being rich. You can have everything. So I feel also very calm when I'm here because I work as a creative writing teacher during the day, and at night I write, I read, and I realize I need nothing more. I'm very comfortable with that, and that's why, and also that's something most of the time we don't realize, but you need to be comfortable to write because you need to have a moment in the day when you are not thinking of really a lot of stuff, just to sit down and write. You need to have that. For me, I need to wake up, go out and walk, work, have everything kind of very like in order, and then I can write. And when I was in Spain, it was not like that. All the time I was worrying about the visa problems, the food, the money. All the time it was trouble. And I felt also in Europe, for me, it's hard to write, or in other countries, because I feel like I'm not a citizen, because I have to make a lot of things to belong to that place. I have to prove that I can belong there. Here, I don't have to do that. I feel like I have rights. So maybe that's, I think a lot of material problems are part of writing problems. Most of the time, if you don't feel like you belong, or if you don't feel like you have rights, it's really hard to write.
The other day, you talked about the relationship between your writing and the land and the earth and the insects. Could you tell these guys, because I already heard it, could you tell these guys about how that influences your work and your ability to write, just what you were talking about, but as it relates to the land?
Of course, when we were on Wednesday in the event, I was telling that when you are mestizo, I am mestiza, you have two worlds living in you. One is part of the Spanish heritage, Catholicism, Spanish language, a lot of traditions that have to do with those worlds, with the religion, with the Spanish culture. But on the other side, what we've had for thousands of years is the indigenous heritage that is still very, very, very strong and very important here in Ecuador. And indigenous people here in Ecuador, they relate with the land as a divine entity, as a goddess. So I kind of relate with the land in that way, not that much, because in myself there's always a struggle between two worlds. But when I was writing "This World Does Not Belong to Us," I was trying to rediscover that part of myself that belongs to this land as a mother. So this land, this territory, this earth here in Cuenca, in the Andes, has its own poetics. You know, death and life are not the same as for the Catholic way of thinking. Death and life are just a cycle for indigenous people. For example, everything is circular. So when I was writing "This World Does Not Belong to Us," I was trying to rediscover that part of myself that was always feeling that there was a part of me that was relating with this territory in a different way. So I was trying to rediscover the symbols, the poetic in that way of thinking. And when I discovered that, it was really easier to write about insects, earth, gardens, because I didn't have to invent anything. Everything has its own poetic, its own language. And it was way better than I could write. It was poetic itself.
Does anybody have a question or a comment to make to Natalia?
I just find that very powerful, the whole idea of mestizaje. It just really impacted me, because I find even with my friends that we write, and then like the struggle of like, what does it mean for us, our own identity and our own experience and our own lives as we write? Because writing, as you're saying, like for me, as I take it, it has to be real. Like if it's not real from your heart, from your experience, from your pain, from your joy, from whatever feelings you have, it's just not writing anymore. It just turns into something to I don't know, like I find the whole process of writing for me is almost like being completely naked, being completely vulnerable. And that what you were saying about that identity struggle of that internal war, I just found so powerful as you described it, and so powerful as you tapped into that constrained and oppressed identity, how you found beauty and a new way to relate to yourself and to things around you. So that's powerful. I think that's going to inform my own process a lot. So thank you for sharing that. And just to like move a little bit to a topic that I really wanted to ask you about is the other story, the chess piece. I just wanted to say, like, I wish I would have read it in Spanish as well. Like, I saw just the piece in English. I thought it was really well written in English, actually. I thought the story was, I loved that story. Like, I also just read it once because it was, again, very, very raw, very gruesome. I find like the style of your writing is quite vivid in both pieces. I would love to read more. I haven't read a lot of your pieces, and I'm so intrigued right now. So that second one was about, it was just so real and was so raw, and I wonder how was the process for you to bring yourself together, because even as you shared with us, it's a time that it was very tough, and it's still very hard to even read it again. But how do you gather the courage? When was that moment when you were, I can turn this into beauty, into art, and share with other people? And how was that process? Was that a particular moment, or was that a sort of a journey for you?
Well, I think it was a long process. When I first started writing, I wrote a lot of stories that had nothing to do with me or with any emotion I felt. And so those are hidden somewhere. Because once I realized I needed to touch something in myself that was hurting, even if I only write fiction, right? I create characters. I haven't written nonfiction, but I had to connect with a real emotion, as you said. So it was kind of a long process, but when I first realized that was when I started writing the novel, This World Does Not Belong to Us. That has a lot of real things, and it was real hard for me to write, but I realized it was the only way to connect with that part of me that was hurting and trying to make it something else. But with chess piece, I had a little help. I think that I was reading David Foster Wallace, and David Foster Wallace, for me, is really honest with himself, even when he's writing fiction, humor, really weird stuff. You can feel that he's hurting inside. Even if it's really like science fiction or something, you can feel him hurting. So I was reading him when I was starting to write that short story, and I told myself, like, you have to go all the way or nothing. Maybe this hurts, but the only way I've ever felt like I can connect with people is by writing, even if the first things I wrote in my life were letters to people that were dead in my family. So for me, the only way of connecting is really by writing. It's the only way I can feel connecting. So when I was writing that short story, and when I am writing, I tell myself, if you are connecting with someone else, even if you don't know, even if it's a reader that you will never know, you have to be honest, because what's more important in life than honesty and tender, right? So I try to put that when I write. But David Foster Wallace was a very good, a very, very, very good companion of writing. And it's like that when I'm reading him, I feel like he's hurting, and I feel like we can, I don't know, I can even touch him even if he's dead and he's not here. But you can feel like you can touch him because he's feeling something real. So that's what I wanted to do. That's what I want to do when I write. That if someone else read it, that that the reader can feel this is real, even if it's fiction, even if it's Martians or robots, but it is real.
Mm-hmm. So how do you translate that honesty into words? Because, for example, if somebody says, oh, I'm hurting so much, I feel this terrible pain because, I'm depressed, whatever, right? That person is being honest, right? She's telling you that she's hurting. But how do you translate that simple way of saying that and of keeping that kind of honesty, but translating that, transposing it into the kind of language that will create art, and at the same time allow you to go even deeper than those simple words of I'm hurting? So artistically, what is this honesty about? How does it permeate what you write?
For me, everything has to do with language. I think we are so used to language, to words, that we just keep repeating them, right? Like, I feel very bad. I am so sad. We say that, and it's just, 3 more words in the world. But I think there's a part of language that is connected to imagination, through childhood imagination. Like, when I was a child, I had 5, 6 years, I was trying all the time to build a machine. But one time my father asked me, what does this machine do? Because it was just a machine with a lot of gears, of plugs. It was just a machine. For me, it was perfect. But when my father asked me what it does, what the machine does, what is the product, the result of it, I started crying, because for me, the perfection of that machine was that the gears were so beautiful. They were working. It was nice to see it. And for me, that is a childhood. That is an imagination of being a child, not expecting things to give results, but trying to look at how them work. And for me, that is my relationship with language. I don't want beauty. I don't want a result. I just want to see it working like pieces of a clock. Like, for me, that's why I write, because it's not like, I don't want it to say I am sad, like with the words I always use in my life that are so not meaningful anymore. I want to turn that sentence into a beautiful machine, like a child, with no purpose. I don't want the result. I don't want beauty. I just want to see it working. I think for a writer, everything is about language. Everything is about those words that we are trying to make meaningful again, because words are not meaningful anymore in the everyday conversation. I can say that's a tree, that's a cat, and that doesn't mean anything anymore. The other day I was reading a beautiful essay of a poet, a Spanish poet, and the essay was about how good or complex poetry can make your brain work different and better, because when you say, for example, my house is a rainbow. That's an unexpected combination of words, and that makes your brain produces serotonin, because it's a new combination. It's like when you are a child and you are learning how to talk and how to write, and words are like boom, an explosion in your brain. So for me, it's like that. Like, we have to rediscover language once and once again to make it meaningful again, to make it worth again. I think that's what makes you turn a common sentence like "I am sad" into a story, because you want to experiment with language, with images, as if you were a child again.
Right. Anybody else that wants to make a comment or ask a question? Or?
I mean, just that image was really powerful. I wrote down what you said. Words are boom and explosion in your brain. I love that. Because, you know, the feeling of, I love languages to begin with. So when you learn, new words and I get it. And to be playful, I think you have to just play. Allow yourself to play and see where it takes you. Yeah. Thank you.
But at the same time, there is that fine line, right, between being too contrived. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, it shows when a writer is trying to impress, right?
Oh, yeah.
Rebuscado, right? Rebuscado, like, I want to be innovative and I'm going to put this and that together. Oh, wow, right? And you can feel that, right? While at the same time, you can still be combining words, as you were saying, that in usual everyday language don't come together, but you put them together in a way that is honest, right?
And also have a purpose.
And have a purpose, right? Have a purpose of creating something that will...
I think that that's the thing. When you are playing with someone that is not there, that is the reader, but you are playing with that reader. You are not saying the reader, look how great I am with words.
Right.
You have to have that communication purpose. You know, not like I'm showing myself, but I'm communicating with you.
Yeah. Anything else about the short stories that you would like to comment on or ask?
I have a question, actually. So we were talking about the two extremes, right? To be almost like contrived, and then there's the other extreme of almost being in a form of paralysis when you get too deep into your own emotions and you can't really do anything once you're at that point. Like, I know some people have strategies of like reading poetry and stuff to get them back into a balance. What do you have strategies that, you know, to get you out of a funk when you feel you're being too silly, or you feel you're being too dramatic or something like that?
Strategies to what?
Like strategies just to you know, to bring it back a little bit, to not sound like you said, you know, not to sound too contrived or not to sound too emotional.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one that I use that I've learned it from Ursula K. Le Guin, that is this science fiction author, that American science fiction author, really, really good. She has this exercise where she writes a story with no adjectives or adverbs in it. And yeah, really very, very clean story with just the facts on it. And then she tries to put like one or two there. That is a great exercise, and I use it a lot, because then you are, how do I say it? You have to make the beautiful things or the pretentious things, you have to turn them into images or into actions, because you cannot use adjectives and adverbs. So it's really good to do that. And also, when I write, I try to understand the poetic language of the things I'm writing. For example, the mountains here in Ecuador. It's not necessary to describe them as majestuous, or I don't know, a lot of words that are being used to describe them, because they have their own poetic, their own semiotic world. They have a lot of beautiful words that you cannot invent, you just have to use them. But to use them, you have to avoid trying to make it really beautiful. You have to understand that they have maybe moth, insects, maybe putrefaction, maybe a lot of things that does not sound beautiful, but they sound real for that place. So I myself, my strategy all the time is not looking for a beauty that is not in the things itself, you know? You don't try to make things beautiful, or don't try to make things look nice, beautiful, spectacular. Just try to discover what they really are when you write them. I think that it has helped me a lot when I write. Not to look for beauty, but look for the real thing in everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like to say too that I noticed in your writing, and something that I really appreciate, is that when your sentences are short, and then to me they kind of have a lightness to it. Like it's like kind of like two stories. So you're reading, the sentences of, oh, okay, nothing's happening. I don't have a leg, I don't have an arm, or so there's certain lightness to it. And then there's the other story. You're like, oh my God, this person is like, depressed, or like her father is actually an alcoholic, but she's not saying that her father is an alcoholic. It's like in the story, it's very light, because it's this person that is becoming a child, and it's. So I think that's another resource to like go away from like being too dramatic, and just treat what you want to say kind of with certain lightness that I really enjoy.
But depth at the same time.
Yes, yeah. So it's like two things.
That's what I was going to say. I didn't think the bear mask was light at all. I thought it was just tragic.
Yeah, but the imagery, right? The imagery can be read at a very light kind of level, right? Because here is this person wearing a mask, right? Who turns into a baby.
That she's suffering. It's you get that.
Oh.
But
I thought they were really suffering. They weren't eating, they were going to school, they were all dirty. Yeah. I thought they were suffering a lot.
Yeah, but that you interpret that.
Exactly. You don't read the word suffer in the story,
but
right?
The sentences are more like another level.
Yeah.
Okay.
About that story, I was wondering, like, the reactions she had from her family, like how do they receive like these stories? And how does it impact?
Do you still talk to your family?
No, I mean it's
They actually talk to you.
No, because sometimes like putting away this like public things that are so personal, they impact the people involved. As
I know.
so I'm just like wondering how does that, well, I don't know.
Yeah. How do you deal with that?
Well, when I first wrote The Bear Mask, because it had memories that I share with my sisters, there's a very real memory of us that when my father was not drinking, he was a good father, and he was going into our room when we were really little and scaring us, and it was a really nice moment to share with him because we all laugh and everything. So that's a real memory of us. So when I first wrote it, I shared it with my sisters, and I told them I wrote this, that it has the three of us. We are in the short story, I'm sorry, but I had to write it because I was a lot of time wanting to write that story, and it was haunting me, so I had to write it. And my sisters, they are really, really comprehensive with it. One of them did not want to read it, and she told me, it's okay, I just don't want to read it because it hurts sometimes, you know. And the other one read it and told me, wow, that's our life when we were child. But for example, I didn't give it to my mother so I didn't want her to read it because she had read another story that has to do with us, with our childhood. And the worst part for me is that she felt guilty or something. So I didn't want her to read it, but we had a good relationship. We have a good relationship. I love my mother. So if I can just, I don't know, avoid her reading it, it is better. And my father, he usually does not read what I write. So it's okay. I mean, we've had a lot of honest conversations about that time and about everything. And in the end, well, they know that I work with real emotions, even if I write fiction. And well, they haven't been mad or I don't know. My mom has been sad about it, but I've talked with her, and now it's okay. But it's always hard, I think. What I did was just talking it with my sisters to see if it was okay with them, because it was us, the three of us, that I felt that we were the main characters of it. So I had to ask for permission with them, and it was okay. But I don't know, I think it's really hard when you are dealing with stuff that is not only yours. In my case, it's not only my story. So when I have that situation, I talk with the people involved and I show them. And if they don't want it to be published or anything, I just put it away. I don't care. But I have to show them first, like, I did this. I think it's our story. So look at it and tell me, how do you feel with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together. Is there anything else that anybody would like to squeeze in these last few minutes?
I just wanted to mention something really quick. I really appreciated what you shared about almost turning into a child when you are in the process of writing. And I found that so inspiring, because the process of writing, when it's a very hard emotion and difficult emotion to deal with, it can be a little bit of a painful process. And yet, when you tap into that fantastic world, into that magic of just being a child and playing and enjoying it and letting the serotonina kind of invade your body. So I found that tool to be very useful. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I find that could be even like a way to dive into that space without letting oneself go lost into the emotion. So thank you.
Well, thank you all. There is a very good writer that has a lot of exercise for writing. Mostly they are used for childs, but I use them for myself because they are really fun, and those exercises make you feel like you're a child and you are just playing and writing. And it's Gianni Rodari. I really recommend it to you. He's really good, and he has this book that is fantasy grammar, and it has a lot of writing exercises. Really good.
I think I'm going to send you an email asking you for all the writers that you recommend tonight. So we can do a top list, Natalia's favorite authors.
Yeah, great.
Because I keep trying to, okay, I need to look for that author. Okay, but I don't even remember. So, I will definitely ask you, so maybe we can share with
with the group.
Follow-up.
Great.
Well, thank you very much, Natalia. Muchas gracias.
Well, I'm really happy I was able to do this with you. I was really hoping to go there, but I hope it could be next time.
We have mountains here, just so you can feel safe and a lot of nature.
Yeah, there will be a next time. You're so young and you're writing more and more. Yeah, there will be a next time.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Millón de gracias.